Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to Deep Talk with Kessar. I am very happy to have you with us today as a part of my Global Educator interview series. I am having a conversation with educators from different countries and different backgrounds to learn how education is changing around the world. So today I'm very happy to welcome Robby from Spain to my show. So Robby is an IB Continuum Coordinator PE and SEHS Educator at Newton College. He has more than 19 years of experience in education and he is also an IB examiner and IB workshop leader. So alongside education, Robby also works as a strength and conditioning coach with Club Excel, working with athletes at the professional level. So Robby, welcome to Deep Talk with Kessar. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for hosting me. Yeah, it's great to be here too. So yeah, uh, very busy. Lots of things with education and coaching, but I think they intertwine. So it's probably more or less the same kind of stuff.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we will start our conversation, I will like for our audience to hear your story directly from you. Rabbi, could you please introduce yourself and tell us little about your journey in education, sports, and what you are doing today?
Yeah. So well, a long time ago, I was a failed rugby player. So it was made clear I was not going to make it to the top level or maintain myself there, and that I needed to get my act together. And I'd always been interested in teaching. I've always found education extremely exciting, possibly due to the fact I was lucky enough to have some very good teachers when I was young who made a big difference on you. So, we're able to sort of keep you motivated, push you, not let you settle down and just sort of get by. And once I finished university, well, I moved to Spain. So at the time I was living in England, I moved to Spain, and lucky enough, they needed a PE teacher at Newton College. At the time we were a British school. Now we're an international school, and it all started from there. So I started just teaching primary PE with some IB MYP, and then from then on took various roles, um, some leadership roles, with my time to having recently been given the IB Continuum Coordinator role. So yeah, that's how it kind of started. And then obviously as uh, you want to do more. So the good thing about the IB is they regularly allow you to apply to be an examiner. I was once again lucky enough to get my foot in the door, and with time, well, sort of I've gone from was an assistant examiner to currently being the principal examiner for paper 2, and obviously workshop leader. That was another one of my passions. So the good thing about being a workshop leader is you get to meet people from all around the world, and you get to see how different schools and different teachers apply IB principles, and what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And then you've just got to bring it back and see what works in your school context, because it's not always going to work.
Okay, thank you so much, Robby. That gave us a really interesting starting point. Let's begin our conversation. Before we will start our conversation, I will request you when I talk, please mute yourself. Then when you talk, then you will mute yourself, unmute yourself. Okay, so
Okay.
that not make a noise. Thank you. So my first question is to you that you have been working in education for more than 19 years, right? So and your journey has included PA, sports science, IB education, examiner, teacher training, and how now IB coordination. What originally teach you to education and what has keep you to passionate about teaching so many years?
Well, as I'd kind of previously mentioned, my PE, well, my journey into education started with PE. I've always been very clear. I prefer to be a PE specialist, um, and then obviously sports science is slightly different within the IB/SEHS. But I found coaching and teaching PE very similar because it's very much about building a nice relationship with the children. It's easier to build a relationship, I feel, than in a classroom because you're outside, which makes it more fun. So, children generally prefer to be outside, and that helps. And then what's kept me passionate about teaching is the constant change. Yeah. So the world around us is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. And that means every year you have to look for something different, something innovative. You don't want to change everything. You want to keep the basics, but it does give you a chance to keep getting better. For example, currently, the month of August, I'm receiving a workshop from the IB. So I'm delivering a sports science one, but I'm also receiving leading the learning, so leadership workshop. And I think that's the beauty of education, is there's always something new to learn. There's always new perspectives. There's always something you can do that is slightly different. What worked one year may not work the other. It's very dependent on the people around you. So you have to be able to adapt. But that's what keeps me passionate, is just the constant change, and there's always something new to learn. And I think that's just brilliant.
Okay, that's interesting. So, and looking back to your journey, we have there particular moment or experience that changed the way you saw yourself as an educator.
Yeah. So obviously when you're young, you think you know it all. Yeah. And sometimes it's difficult to take opinions on board. And I think one of my biggest changes that occurred was a deputy headmaster. We had that he came into our school, John Patino. He was only with us for 2 years, but in those 2 years, he made me see that you have to evolve. You can't become lazy. You can't just stay. Yeah, the kids loved my lessons, but that wasn't good enough. He wanted more, and he wanted me to do more, and he wanted me to want to do more. And I think that's what really helped me change as an educator. And also having children. So before I had children, I was very much, the theory says we have to do this, we have to do that. If you don't follow instructions, this is the consequence, this is this. And since having children, I've realized that you need to have a lot more. It's a two-way conversation. It's, why did you do this? So what's happened? Is there something bothering you? There's always a story behind difficult, challenging behavior. It's not as easy as it comes across. There's always something behind. And I think that did change once I had children.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for your answer. So you have experience with British curriculum, IPC, MYP, and DP. So you are had the opportunity to see different approaches to education. From your experiences, what are some of the biggest difference between these systems in the way they approach students' learning and development?
So I think the biggest difference is, obviously, also with having started almost 20 years ago, things were very different then. The British curriculum has evolved, but it is a lot of it is pretty much some sort of rote learning. The Spanish system, which because we also, as we're in Spain, we also follow some of the Spanish curricula, and that's very much memorizing orientated. And the IPC, which is something we're moving away from, but we'd been doing for a good 10 to 12 years. The IPC was more project work, which was very similar to the MYP. So the IB MYP, it's about the learner. You're doing things, you're exploring, you're inquiring, and the IPC was similar. But we thought, if we're an IB school for MYP and DP, why are we doing the IPC? Why don't we just apply to be PYP? So we're currently a PYP candidate school, and in the next 6 or 7 months, we'll be having our inspection. And so far, from the feedback we've had, everything looks positive. It looks like we will be granted PYP within our school. So we're currently in the implementation stage, waiting to be given the authorization. I think what I've seen from all having worked in various curricula is there's not a perfect one. Yeah, no one curricula is perfect. And that's something the IB do really well. The IB say, this is great, but you have to apply it to your school context. So our school, is in Spain. It's one of the few international schools in the area, and we've got currently, I think it's over 80 nationalities. So when I first started, we were mainly Spanish children and a couple of expat British people, and now we've got over 80 different nationalities. And the good thing about this is it allows us to grow, to be more open to what works in some areas, what works in other areas, and bring that into our school context. Sometimes we've tried to implement things that hasn't worked, doesn't matter. We then try again. And I think you just have to try and find the perfect balance. There's no 100% right. I do like the way that the IB system, so PYP, MYP, and DP, encourages inquiry, encourages students to question the teacher. And I think that's part of a good teacher, allows the people to question them. They don't see it as an attack, rather they see it as, the student really wants to grasp the understanding as to why so they're going to question. And then that's when you send them away. Well, you go and find out why. And then they come back and you can have a conversation. And I think that's what I really like about the IB.
That's really interesting. So, and if you could take one strength from each of these approaches and combine them into the one education system, what would we choose?
Um, that's a tough question, but I think I would probably go for the inquiry-led learning. So I think nowadays it's very easy to gain information. Most people now have internet access. They have a phone on them with internet access, so they can usually find an answer quickly. But they then have to know how to use that information. So I think so the IPC does the same. The IB, PYP, MYP, DP less so, because the DP is a bit more structured. But so the IPC, which we've had some really good learning through the IPC, and their entry point, exit points. But that where they could just inquire, so they get given some information and they have to find out more about it rather than just finding the answer. So that's how I would sort of try and combine the perfect educational system, is just let children and students find out information. Obviously, you have to scaffold it, you have to send them in the right direction, but then they have to try and find the answers themselves.
That's good. Thank you. So let's talk about students. Students today are growing up with technology, social media, AI, and huge amount of information available to them. From your experience working with students across different age groups, what do you think is one of the biggest challenges students are facing today that educators may sometimes overlook?
I think personally, the biggest challenge they're facing is distraction. So we were one of the first schools in our area to implement iPads in education, and it definitely has its pros, but I also think it has a lot of cons. They're used to looking at a screen. obviously, as the students get slightly older, so talking more sort of secondary age group, they're probably more technologically advanced than us. So they find ways around, the systems of blocking, and they'll find a way of playing a game mid-lesson. And that's one of the challenges. They are now easily distracted. They have that access to games or to a news article they want to read. And I remember a couple of years back, one of my students decided he was going to watch the US Open in one of my sports science lessons because he wanted to see how Alcaraz was doing. And he was reprimanded for that, but at the time he had that distraction because he was using an iPad. I also think pressure and comparison. So they have the pressure of everybody compares themselves to each other, as opposed to maybe saying, my strength maybe is presentation and your strength is written work. No, everyone's constantly, and parents particularly, parents I find compare their children's results to their friends, because a lot of parents do compare the results, and I think that's unnecessary pressure for the children. In an ideal world, you're going to be using individual plans for every child, and the results will be individualized, obviously. And I think that's one of the big problems they have. So the distractions from technology, and then just the pressure they have being compared. We've always had that pressure of being compared, but I think now the pressure is slightly bigger, and they have less opportunities to face failure. So that also makes them less resilient to things, in my opinion. There's a lot of everyone's correct and this is always right, but sometimes in life there is failing. That's what I love about my role outside of education, which is the coaching side, the strength and conditioning side. In a team sport, there's always a winner, there's always a loser. You may have had the best game of your life and you could still lose, and it doesn't matter. It's about the process. It's not always about the result, it's about the process. So I think if we can sort of let students know that being compared to somebody shouldn't happen, because they are in a process of getting better, especially the younger children, and I think that's key.
Okay, I understand. So, what do you think teachers can differently help to students become more confident, independent, and responsible learner?
So I think the biggest thing is creating a strong relationship. So taking the time to build that relationship with the students, because if they feel trusted and they trust you, they'll understand that when you push them, it's for their own good. You're not being horrible. You're not trying to make them feel bad. You're actually trying to get the best out of them. I also think that if you've got a good relationship with the children, they're probably more likely to want to do something nice, and they will want to work for you. I've seen that for example, with my own children. Some teachers have been great with my daughter, but my son, who's different to my daughter, has a different profile, haven't been quite so great because they haven't built that relationship with him. So I think that's one of the biggest struggles we have.
Okay, that's very important point. So let's talk about relationship and high expectations. Sometimes that really stood out to me about your educational philosophy is your focus on relationship, building high expectations, creating a supportive environment. So I want to ask you about that. How can teachers build a strong relationship with students with still mentioning high expectation and accordingly?
Is to be honest. I think honesty. You need to be consistent. So it's not something you can move in and out of, but every day you have your expectations. So I don't know. The lesson starts at 10 to 2, you're here at 10 to 2. You don't stroll in 5 minutes late. If you have to have your PE kit on every day, you have your PE kit on. Or if you're having to get changed and you get given 10 minutes to change, you've got 10 minutes. And if they don't do it, then there's a consequence. Yeah. So maybe they miss 2 minutes of the warm-up game they like. Maybe they have to come back and see you during patio time so you can explain the importance of being on time and how that's showing respect to the rest of their class who have been here on time. You've got to treat every student as an individual. Okay, so what works? So maybe one student I can try and get more out of them. So maybe she's a really hard worker and I can really push her. But maybe another student can't be pushed quite as much. And I think so that you need to build that initial relationship. And I think a big part of that is just being open, being yourself, just be a nice person. If you don't like children, if you're not a nice person, what are you doing in teaching? Yeah, what are you doing in education? We're here to help them grow. So you've just got to let that come through. And then obviously praise effort. So every time they try, it may not be the right answer, but they've tried, praise that. So they get to see that really what you're interested in is the process. Yeah. So I want you to try your best. I want you to try and do this. And then if you've done your best, but you still haven't quite reached our learning objective, it doesn't matter because you've tried. We'll find a way of getting you to that learning objective. And I think once students see that you're going to hold them accountable. So if they don't do something, you're gonna be honest. You're gonna have that tough conversation with them. I'm disappointed in you today. I don't think you've tried your best. I know you can do so much more. Next lesson, I want you to try and do this slightly better. And then just the other way around. I've noticed that today you seem tired, but thank you so much for trying your best. You've done really well. You've been really positive in the lesson. Or I know you're scared of the forward roll, for example. Our children that have panic of going, upside down on their head. Just praise the effort. They may not reach the full forward roll, but they go through the steps. Just praise that. So I think it's just about being yourself, and the children knowing they can trust you. But also maintain those high expectations, because at the end of the day, they're so much happier by the end of the year when they can do all these things and they've pushed boundaries and they've faced fears. And I think that definitely helps. And then as the years go on, if you're lucky enough to be them for more years, they get to know you better. So that's one of the advantages of being a PE teacher. You get to spend more time than them.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So let's talk about your IB experience. Now I want to talk about your IB experience, that you are not only in a sorry. Okay, our time is already 20 minutes over. So let's talk about education and sport. So one thing that make your career particularly interesting is that you work in both education and professional sport, right? So you each PE and sports exercise and health science, and you also work as a strength and conditioning coach with a professional handball team. So, what has professional sports taught you about teaching students?
I'd like to start the other way around. So, what has teaching students taught me to work in a professional team environment? Yeah. So, because that's where I started. I started in education, then moved into the strength and conditioning with Elche Handball Club. And what I saw is, even though these are grown-ups, grown men who are playing this professionally, we still have the same dynamics within the group. So instead of a classroom, it's a team. You still have the leader, you still have the shy person, you still have the outsider, and it's a way of getting them all to gel perfectly. What has professional sport taught me about education? That standards matter. Yeah. So that's why I have high expectations, because if one day you allow a bad training session, poor form in an exercise. So imagine we're doing a deadlift. Form is vital. We don't want to injure the player. So strength and conditioning is more about avoiding injuries, in my opinion, than high performance, because there's no point having a player who can perform highly if they're injured. So the first day you allow one of your players not to use correct form on a deadlift because they want to put a bit more weight, then that's when you start to open that can of worms where things end up going wrong. And I think it's the same in a classroom. So, the one day maybe you're not feeling well. We all know that as a teacher, it's usually easier to go into school than to take a day off, because all the paperwork you have to leave in place to take your day off. It's easier to go in. And they're the kind of days where you can let your standards slip. So these are the kind of days where you may, instead of teaching them, go, "Oh, just go and play." And that's when things for me start to go wrong. And I think that's what professional sport has helped me see within teaching. In the past, I've gone through this. You're not feeling well, you just give them a football, a volleyball, or a basketball. Just go and play, and see if I can make it to the end of the day, and then just go home and sleep and see if I feel better. And since being involved with the professional sport, I've seen that actually that's not a good thing to do. You've got to set the standard high right from the beginning. And in the classroom, it's the same. You've got to make sure that every second counts, because in professional sport, 1 second can be the difference between staying professional or being demoted. And in the classroom, I think it's the same. They have to get used to high pressure environments, but with that support behind them. So you're always encouraging, but you ensure that they really want to push themselves.
Okay, thank you so much for your answer. So before we will close, I have one final question for you. That education is changing very quickly. You all know we have AI, new technologies, new teaching methods, and changing expectations. But after almost 2 decades in education, what is the one thing you believe education should never lose, no matter how much technology and education system change?
I think the one thing educators should never lose is the will to learn. So to constantly learn. There's, as we've said, everything's evolving. AI can pretty much write an essay for a student. So we now need to find a way to test that knowledge without letting AI take over. So I think if we have to learn, we're constantly looking into how we can do things differently. Yeah, we've always sent an essay as a piece of homework. Sending an essay as a piece of homework now is pointless because AI can do it for them. So we have to find ways of getting them to carry on to be inquisitive, so they want to keep learning, whilst also taking into consideration the new technologies, because there's no point trying to fight them. They're here to stay. And I think as long as a teacher's willing to learn and adapt and not stay settled in what worked 5 years ago or 3 years ago, just keep learning. There's so many courses out there, to better yourself as a teacher. And I think that's one of the great things that a good teacher should have.
That's beautiful way to end our conversation. So I thank you to you. Thank you so much, Robby, for joining me today. I'm really enjoyed our conversation and learned a lot from your experience. Today we will talk about your journey in education, different education systems, students, and the IB approach, teacher development, sports, and lots of things. So I especially enjoyed hearing how your experience in both education and professional sport has shaped the way you think about learning. So development, relationship, and high expectation. Thank you once again for sharing, giving your time and sharing very good things with us. So it was really pleasure to having you here.
Well, thank you very much for allowing me to share my thoughts with educators from around the world. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone who joined us today. I hope this conversation gave you something useful to think about. If you enjoyed this interview, please share, like, to with teachers and students, parents, coach, and anyone interested in education. I'm Kessar, and we will sign off from Deep Talk with Kessar. Thank you once again for joining us. I will see you in the next conversation. Take care and keep learning. Bye bye.